So good evening, everybody. My name is Michelle McGlone. I'm the Director of Brookline Adult and Community Education. We're thrilled to have a very special guest speaker with us this evening, Marcus Gleysteen. Marcus is the founder and principal in charge of Marcus Gleysteen Architects, a residential design studio located near Boston South Station. Over the past 40 years, he has designed award-winning projects across the globe. Marcus got his start in architecture as a model maker while studying sculpture at Cooper Union in New York City. The son of a diplomat, he grew up in a number of different cities, including Washington, D.C., Stockholm, Paris, and St. Petersburg. Marcus's work expresses his dedication to timeless design principles. His many travels and artistic training have embedded a strong sense of purpose, craft, and beauty in every project he works on. So I'd like to turn this over to Marcus. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. That was a great intro. I hope I can live up to that. And thank you all for joining us this evening. I'm going to talk about modern architecture in Brookline, in particular, our work in areas with a strong historical character. However, this is not a talk about style, it's a talk about design. You're not going to hear me weigh in for one side or the other. We're just going to talk about what we think is the appropriate response to the circumstances we encounter when doing any project. Before I do that, I'm going to give you a brief visual background of our firm's work. Then I'm going to show you a couple of projects, just one shot each of work that we've done in Brookline that you may or may not be familiar with. Then we're going to go into three case studies, three specific projects that we've done that have some interesting features, but also sort of embody our firm's approach to everything. If I run out of time, I'll try to stop fast, talk faster and just flip through the slides faster, or simply stop. But anyway, a little bit about me. I started drawing pictures when I was old enough to hold a crayon. I started with ships, and I moved on to cars and airplanes. When in high school, I discovered the delights of drawing naked people. But after graduating from Cooper Union, like most artists, I faced starvation, or at least a severely constrained lifestyle. But during that period, on my honeymoon when I was 22, we went to Italy, and I made the life-saving discovery that all of my favorite artists of the Renaissance also made a living by drawing naked people, but also they designed buildings at the same time. So if Michelangelo could do it, I could do it too, so here I am. One thing though, having started architecture, I've pretty much been swept into it, and I've been very lucky to, I started off as a sculptor, but we're now getting to a point where the work we do in our firm is as satisfying, I think, as anything I could do in the sculpture studio. So I'm quickly going to take you through, so that's enough about me. I'm going to quickly go through some slides of our firm's work. None of these are in Brookline, but the purpose of this is to illustrate to you our ecumenical approach to design. So I'm going to share my screen. And if I look bewildered at any time, because I'm trying to figure out how to make all the technology around me work. I'm 65, I wasn't born with this stuff in my brain. Share screen, here we go. So the first house that I'm showing you was our first major project. It was built in 1990 for $100 a square foot. It took 5 years to design, and it was essentially a PhD thesis in residential design I did on my own. Most of the work I was doing during the period was commercial. 6 years later, we got our first big commission on Nantucket. This enabled me to quit my day job at Elkus Manfredi and start my own firm in 1996. A few years later, in 2003, we got a commission to build a very large brick house in Concord behind Concord Academy. This followed by other houses in Weston. This is one of those, another sort of shingle style-y house, although we tried to do this house without any gables. That was the, at the same time, we were also working on modern houses. This is a project we started in 2000. It's probably to this day the most outrageous project we've ever built, and by far the most expensive. This is a picture of a house, detail of a house we did in Carmel Valley in California in 2006. This is an equestrian facility that we designed and built in 2011 in conjunction with John Blackburn Associates, a leading equestrian facility designer from Washington, D.C. This is probably our best known recent house. It's a house on Lake Sunapee. It's a house that's made of glass, steel, and stone, and timber frames. At the same time, we also designed another large single style house in Weston, but counterbalancing that with another modern house on Lake Sunapee. A couple of restaurants along the way. I don't know if any of you have been to the back room at Moody's in Waltham. Yet another shingle style house in Lexington at this time. This overlooks Wilson's Farm, if you're familiar with that. A great little amuse-bouche of a project in New Boston, which is in New Hampshire. It's basically a porte cochere with a gardening shed and a mudroom attached to it. That's next to an historic farmhouse. Another house on Lake Sunapee. And finally, a house in Kennebunkport right on the coast. So that sort of gives you a range of the sort of things that we do here and there. So moving on to Brookline specific projects, the first project we did was this one. This is a renovation of an existing house. The element on the far right we added, but all the other stuff is pretty much the way the house was when we started. It was a California contemporary on George's Lane, if you know where that is. And coincidentally, this client later hired us to do that expensive modern house I showed you earlier. I'll go back to it quickly, see if I can do that. This one, whoop, that one right there. So he had very interesting taste in architecture, which we had a lot of fun with. So this is the second project we did in Brookline. Some of you may recognize it. It's the old governor's mansion on Sargent Road. Whoop, skipped ahead. We did this project in 2003, and it's going to be one of the projects I'm going to be talking about this evening. Next, we did a very large project on Warren Street in conjunction with a interior design and architectural firm from New York. As you can see, it's a very, very conservative, historically precise house, except for its enormous size. We followed that with a natatorium that we did in Brookline off of East Street. And then, of course, we have the left side as well. This is a house we built. We'll also be talking about this house for a bit this evening. And finally, the last house, this is a renovation addition to the Hugh Stubbins design house that was done on the end of Cedar Street, which we'll also be talking about. So we're now going to start talking about the case studies, starting with the governor's house. In two of the cases that we're going to be talking about, we were working with houses that one was 150 years old, the other was like 60 years old. And what both these houses had in common, they were designed for another time and age. And so the main thing we had to do with these houses is to figure out how to reconfigure them for the way people live today. Traditional larger houses were designed around two ideas in the past. First was the accommodation of the served as long as the servers. What I meant by that is these houses were, large houses were designed to accommodate servants. And so a lot of the bigger, older houses that you see in Brookline and Newton and other places were divided into areas where there were some very beautiful, very elegant rooms up front. And as soon as you got around the back and upstairs, down to the basement or in the attic, it became a warren of smaller support spaces. There's also a very clear separation between public and private areas and between spaces that were serving and spaces that were served. And what I mean by that is a kitchen would be completely separated from the dining or living room. Another big thing that was different back then is the garages were not attached to houses, and also they were a lot smaller. Cars were smaller, and people that could afford to live in large houses typically had people to drive their cars for them. So starting with that, let's go to what we call the governor's house. This is an amazing piece of architecture. It is a combination of Greek Revival and Gothic. And if you look at it very closely, especially the columns that support the colonnade around the base of the house, you can see they're quadrifoil Gothic stone columns. But on the other hand, you see these really funky Greek Revival details, as well as you know, these very whimsical supports for the roof. And this house, it's amazing how the roofs come down to perfect points, and this poor gutter has to pick up all that water coming off. House was built around 1850. It's made out of Utah sandstone. That was in an ashlar pattern that was stippled. And what I mean by that, after they cut the stone, they hammered it to give it a textured effect. Not to steal the punchline, but the building on the left is brand new. We designed and built it, and it is our strategy here was to design a house, a garage that would look like it was the original carriage house of the original building. And I know from a historic preservation standpoint, something new should always look somewhat new. But I wasn't as educated to those standards as I am now, but we still had a great deal of fun doing it. Thought Forms was the builder. They brought in you know, the resources that were brought to bear on this project, and we repointed all the masonry, getting the mortar right, getting the colors right. What's also really unique about this photograph, if you see the chimney right here, that ostensibly goes all the way down to the foundation. In order to make the new plan work, we cut the chimney off under the framing of the second floor, put in 2 3-foot thick steel beams that carry the weight, so we could create the sort of floor plan that we needed inside. The grounds were designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, and the basement was a renowned stop on the Underground Railroad. When we worked on this house, we did not do it to the standards of historic preservation, but more adaptive reuse. We cleaned up the exterior, we replaced the roof, the flashing, the waterproofing, and we replaced the windows as close in kind to the original. They're double hung, double glazed windows. And the technical challenge was to get the counterweights heavy enough to accommodate the added sheets of glass in these very, very large windows. It was a climb in my mind to replace them, but we had to, because this building is stone and brick. There's no insulation in this building. And there was no way to insulate the building without utterly changing its character. You couldn't put insulation on the outside, you couldn't put insulation on the inside. The only thing we could do was provide double glazing in the windows and insulate Dickens out of the roof. The main changes were really to the interior. In this case, as I described before, the primary spaces are pretty much the same geometrically, but everything in them is new. And then that was about half to a third to a half of the house. The rest of the house was a warren of little spaces, and we went at those hammer and tongs, and we got rid of all the passageways, all the servants' quarters, the various levels, and created a coherent floor plan on the first and second floor. So this is a detail of the garage, of the new garage, that you can see the level of detail and thought that went into the, it really hats off to the people that built this. For them, it was really a labor of love. So this is the, as you enter the house, you enter a very formal foyer. That door leads to the dining room. And the foyer leads to a rotunda. And I never saw it, but legend says that there's a seal of Massachusetts under this floor somewhere. We never found it. And if you look up to the rotunda, there it is, with a beautiful skylight up above it. This is the stair hall. The geometry of the stair is original, but as in all these spaces, with the exception of the rotunda, the finishes are new. It's a new stairway, new floor, new doors, new trim. The building was originally renovated in the early 80s by Shepley Bullfinch. But I think what I understand is the client ran out of money. When our client walked up that stairway, he said, if I'm spending all this money for a stair, it better not sag and it better not creak. So we replaced it. This is a detail of the stair. Newels are a lot of fun to design in our office, and we simply took the design of the quadrifoil columns that you see outside and used them for the stair newel. This is the shot of the living room. All the trim is new, but it was based on what was there before. One of the big things you do when renovating an historic house is you have to take the ceiling off. You have to take the plaster out, because typically a lot of it contains some asbestos. But to make these spaces work, you have to put in lighting, and a lot of recessed lighting, and that requires taking out the ceilings and sometimes actually lowering the ceiling heights to accommodate the new indirect lighting. This is the butler's pantry that leads to the dining room. Both the fireplace you see here and the fireplaces you see in this shot are new. Here's the kitchen. And the main thing we did to this house, it had a butler's pantry, a second butler's pantry, a kitchen, a scullery, another pantry, then a bunch of smaller rooms. And we blew them all out to create an L-shaped, what we call great living space. So the kitchen overlooks the informal dining area, and around the corner to the right is the family room. Remember I mentioned that big chimney, that those two 3-foot beams are right up here. And that it enables us to get this 4.5 sweep of a large space with windows looking into the side yard, and then the end windows looking into the backyard, that utterly transformed the character of the house and made it someplace where any of us would want to live. So this is a shot of the informal dining area, then looking to the family room, and this is a shot back from the family room to the informal dining area. They're separated by a secondary informal stairway. So the nightmare of your 3-year-old coming down during a cocktail party not wearing any pajamas, well, that can happen here. This is another shot of the family room looking back at the kitchen and dining area. So let me see if to repeat, the strategy for this house was to save the noble spaces. This house was like a miniature Downton Abbey when we started. So you know, they must have had, in the old days, they probably had 10 live-in servants in this house. So we talked about the big eating kitchen. In addition to the 2-car garage that you saw down the hill, I think the site is about 7 acres. We built a shingle style-y 3-car garage for the rest of their cars. But our main objective here was to modernize the plan while leaving the exterior as untouched as we possibly could. So now for something radically different. Case study number 2 is a modern house on the end of Cedar Street. That was this house predates the Gropius house in Lincoln down the street from where I live by about 10 or 12 years, I think. The architect of record for this was Royal Barry Wills, and if you're familiar with the history of New England architecture, they were the preeminent firm of traditional houses over the last 50 years. They did a really great job of combining traditional New England forms, you know, ranging from colonial to federal and Georgian, with, you know, the living requirements of the post-war generation. But somehow in the 1930s, they hired this young squirt named Hugh Stubbins, who just got back from Europe. And Hugh Stubbins, you know, founded Hugh Stubbins Architects. Are any of you familiar with his buildings? Well, he designed the City Core in Manhattan, but his most famous building in Boston is the Federal Reserve Building on Atlantic Avenue downtown. So, I mean, this guy he was in his 20s when he designed this, but he became a heavy hitter. But the thing about this house, he came back with visions of Le Corbusier, Walter Gropius, and Mies van der Rohe in his head, and he met the reality of building a house in New England in the 1930s. So for every cool avant-garde detail, like the ribbon windows, the stucco, and the curvilinear stair I'm about to show you, there are all these sort of stolid, standard, practical New England details that he was probably forced to do by the people he worked for. But anyway, it's a pretty amazing project for the late 1930s. So the other thing about this house from a historical standpoint, it was renovated extensively. It had a big addition put on in the 1980s, which changed its character a lot, especially on the back. So it wasn't as pure a form as one would like in terms of preservation. This is the existing shot. This is a shot of the new building. You can see we really retained a lot of the exterior. The only change we made from the previous photograph was that we maintained the sun deck on the end of the second floor, but enclosed the porch, which was really dank and dark, and made it into a bedroom. We also enlarged the front door vestibule and put more of a roof over the front door. In the previous design, the front door was very abrupt and minimal. This is a detail of the entry, and this is the stair tower that holds the curvilinear stair. Over to the right is a tiny 2-car garage designed for Model A's, I think, not Suburbans, which we replaced. So this is a shot of the project after renovation. You can see that the stucco has been replaced. We have new windows, and there's a new garage still separate from the building. There was where my hand is here, a really cool curving glass window, which glass block window that we couldn't save. So this is a shot of the side of the property. Over on the left, you can make out the 80s sort of postmodern addition with a big sort of curving bay window right here. But you can see the ribbon windows, and you think you're looking at something designed by Mies van der Rohe. And this is what it looks like today. Our approach, we work very closely with Brookline Historic in developing this project, because it was done for a developer. They were rightfully suspicious of his motivations, and I think between the commission and our firm, you know, we kept the monetary desires of this project somewhat in check. So what we did, we divided the project into two pieces. One is a new addition over here that's separated by a interstitial piece that is clearly different than both, that tells everyone that, okay, this is the original house from 1930s. Oops, we're going to do something different, and here's the different component. We replaced the stucco, replaced the windows. The addition that you see on the left consists primarily, what we did was we took all the main living spaces that the owners of the house would use every day, and we gave them a new house. And then we took all the secondary uses, bedrooms for children, formal living and dining spaces that today are rarely used, and secondary bedrooms and such, and we repurposed those into the existing house. So over here, there's a bedroom, there's a big living room here. The pop out here is a study. On the back is the formal dining room, but the spaces where the clients spend most of their time is in the new house. You could say, why did we do this? Well, you know, one of the problems that the wealthier towns in around Boston have is that the value of the house itself is minimal in comparison to the value of the land. So if the land is worth $3 million and the house is worth $750,000, there's an imbalance there that the market is going to work very hard to rectify. Is it good? No. No. Does it result in a lot of bad outcomes? Absolutely. And we do our best to work with the tools we have to make the outcomes as successful as they can be. So going inside, this is the original curvilinear stair that was inspired by Corbusiers' stair at the Villa Savoy. Bent plaster with a railing. Corbusiers used steel for the handrail, but Hugh Stubbins was able to find some really good carpenters to do the whole thing out of wood. And the developer came to me and said, we have to tear this stair down because it doesn't meet code. And I said, sure it does. All we have to do is take that handrail and move it up 3 inches and it'll meet building code. I went down and met with the Brookline building inspector and he said, sure, that's fine. So it went from that to this. And you can see the difference. We put these neat little stainless steel stanchions on to hold up the handrail. Here you can see the new extension of the vestibule. So when you move into the new part of the house, big informal living room looking into a big informal dining area. Another shot of the informal living room. By the way, if you notice some objects in the photographs reappearing from project to project, we take the coolest things that we own and use them to style each of the projects we photograph. So this is the kitchen overlooking the informal dining area. That's a shot of the kitchen itself. You can see out to the driveway on one side. And on the left-hand side is a butler's pantry going out to the dining room. And finally, here's the first floor bedroom that used to be a porch. A detail of the back. This is the patio outside the kitchen, and a shot of the entire project at night with the guest room, the sun porch above, and the addition. And what this project has in common with the governor's house is basically eliminating the warren of secondary spaces and the creation of a big primary living space consisting of the kitchen, the informal dining area, and the family room. So I mean, when I was brought up, we ate lunch in the kitchen, and if my dad was late coming home from the State Department or the embassy, wherever we were at, we would eat in the kitchen. But otherwise, most dinners were in a formal dining room. And we had a living room with a fireplace that was lit every night, and that way of living just simply doesn't, some people live that way, but no one I know around here. So finally, I'm going to talk about a new house that we did. Actually, one more detail of this, and we go to case study number 3. The house I'm about to talk about was when we were brought into this project after the original house on the site had gone through demolition review and been demolished. There was another design by a different, previous design by a different architect was going through the permitting process when we were hired to start the project over from scratch. Our clients interviewed a number of top firms, but nothing seemed to click with them. When we interviewed with them after hearing their design objectives, we suggested that maybe they wanted a modern house. And the client looked at me and said, "You mean I can have a modern house in Brookline?" And I said, "Why not?" And we were hired on the spot. What's unique about this lot, though, is that like the governor's mansion, it's on an estate lot. And what that means is that it's visually separated from the houses around it, and is separated by distance topography and landscaping. It doesn't interact in a meaningful way with the existing character or cultural context of its surroundings. Can other people see the house through their backyards, over a fence and through the trees? Yes, but it's not, we took advantage of the opportunity, not that we would not be a disruptive force in the neighborhood. It didn't prevent people from hating the house, at least while it was being built. Our program was to design a house that was fresh, clean, and crisp. What we mean by fresh is, fresh means the creation of new or the reinvention or repurposing of existing ideas to address current issues, problems, and circumstances. The mother of invention is the frustration that comes from tried and true solutions that no longer deal with the reality of the current day. Clean means, just one second. So anyway, let me show you a slide of this house while I talk. There we go. So here's the house. Clean means free from clutter and the complexity that's not relevant to the project. And crisp means clarity of purpose and form. Crisp is not minimalism, but rather it's the combination of forms and ideas where the purpose of each is evident in a manner that's both intellectually and emotionally satisfying. Other design objectives of this project were to create an array of formal entertaining spaces, including a dramatic foyer and stairs. So let me get to that. So as you approach the house, this is an interior courtyard. The garage and the parking court are off to the left. And what you see as you approach in this slide is a curtain wall, and behind that is the entrance foyer and a sculptural stairway. To the right are a set of smaller windows that really don't tell you anything about what's happening beyond them. One is a powder room, the others stare down to the basement, and up above, they're simply hallways. But one thing that is really different about our houses is that most of our houses are only one room deep. And we use the side facing the street or the courtyard for hallways, bathrooms, and closets, and all the rooms on the other side, all the primary spaces have big windows to look out to view sunlight and privacy. So here's another detail of the entryway. One of the problems that a lot of modern houses have, and one of my competitors who I met before a Brookline zoning Board of Appeal meeting said this thing looked like a Sam's Club. What you really need to do to these projects is add scale, and with a more minimalist vocabulary, how do you manipulate the materials to do that? Most of the building is stucco, but these wall of stairs going up are made of Texas limestone, and then creating a highly articulated entryway, doorway, and curtain wall, really helps pull this part of the design together. This is another shot of the entryway at night. If you notice why a lot of modern houses, it's easy for a modern house to look good at night. It's a lot harder for a modern house to look good during the daytime. But here you can start to see the nature of the stairway. So when you enter the house, there's a two-story foyer that leads you to the public parts of this house. The people that commissioned this house entertain very heavily. This house is programmatically designed for fundraisers. And the idea that you can throw 200-300 people into this house several times a year to make money for noble causes. It's in combination with that, there's a private great living space, which you'll see in a moment. And then upstairs are the bedrooms. So as you come in, looking to the right is a large living room with 2 sets of furniture. The fireplace is a gas fireplace, but when you push a button, shades come down to block the windows. A movie screen drops in front of the fireplace, and there's a projector right here, so it turns into a lecture hall, so people can come and give talks there. Looking to the left is a sculptural stairway, and it's made of stainless steel, oak, and glass. And it's counterbalanced by a minimalist wood sculpture that I was commissioned to do, which reflects the glass in polished wood veneer. Here's a shot of the fireplace itself. This is made of 4 pieces of travertine that are book matched to look like a single piece of stone. Another detail of the living room, this leads to the client's office. This is a shot of the living room looking towards the backyard and the dining room. Sorry, wrong way. The formal dining room. One thing about a light fixture like this, don't put it beneath the bedroom of a 9-year-old boy, because when he plays basketball or jumps around, this thing sounds like a lot of breaking glass. Another shot of the formal dining room looking towards the living room. So moving into the informal parts of the house, thank you. This is the kitchen. To the right, to the left is the passageway to the dining room that you saw a moment ago. Behind the cooking wall, or where the wall over here where the stove is the mudroom and all the service spaces required for laundry, kids with soccer uniforms, hockey bags, all of that stuff. And this kitchen looks at this view. It looks over the dining room, informal dining area, to a family room, which opens up to the backyard. One of the big differences between a modern house and a traditional house is the size of windows, and the ability in a modern house to do floor to ceiling windows with lift and slide doors. This is another big design challenge that we have now, is trying to stick or stuff a TV on top of a fireplace, or stuff a fireplace beneath a large TV. But this is the focus of most of the family rooms that we do, a TV fireplace combination. And this is looking back from the family room over the informal dining area that has a skylight that has a light fixture that matches the skylight above it, and back to the kitchen. These are some details of the exterior. There's a pool, of course. Looking back, this is the master bedroom suite up here over the living room. So let's see. Now, hopefully this is making there's some sense made of the images that I'm showing you, but I want to end up this talk by not leaving you in Brookline. I want to take you to Maine for a moment, talk about one of our last projects. We designed a house in Kennebunkport on a road which has houses cheek and jowl next to each other. And this house, we were required by zoning to put gabled roofs on it. But aside from that, we could do pretty much what we wanted. But I've spent a lot of, pardon me for a moment. I've spent a lot of time in Maine. I used to do a lot of sailing, and I really love the look of traditional Maine houses. And so we took our inspiration from the informal semi-industrial structures you see around the fishing harbors, the lobster harbors of Maine. So structures like this, or the one next to it, were really the inspiration for this. Not only in the use of shingle, the stone foundations, all of these things gave us a really strong direction on how to create something that reflected the character and vernacular of Maine. So these are some shots of the inside. It's a fully modern house on the inside. It has flowing open spaces. The kitchen looks into the dining room looks into the great room, and the whole thing looks out on the ocean to the left-hand side, and a private garden on this side. And this is what the house looks like, from the beach. So, where I'm going with this, I think for us, this is the best job we have done in terms of balancing what our clients want in terms of livability with how to respect the environment in which the house is placed. In the first project we showed you, we didn't have to because it was on an estate, but we had to respect the magnificence of the existing house. In the second project, Hugh Stubbins outraged the neighbors by building a white stucco house on a street that's known for its brick and red clapboard houses. And on the third case, we were able to get away with it again by, sort of hiding our project, and we hid it in plain sight. You drive by, you can't see the house. But here, what I wanted to show you here was basically our firm's approach to how to solve this problem. So anyway, that's what I have for you tonight. I hope that made sense, and I'm happy to entertain any questions or comments. Sorry, my throat I don't typically talk that long.
If people are feeling shy and they want to ask a question in the chat at the bottom of your screen, feel free to do that, and I can monitor that. I can't see everybody on the screen, so I won't be able to see you if you raise your hand.
Michelle?
Yes.
Hi, it's Leslie. I'll show you. Could I go ahead and ask a question?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Please.
Sure. Thank you very much for your presentation. I actually thought it was going to be a bit different, and I'd like your opinion regarding the difference of what I was going to present. I'm an old house nut, and I live in Coolidge Corner. Love the neighborhood, love the old houses, and I'm seeing that a lot of the older houses are being replaced with what I call boxes, and boxes are also being built in residential housing in Boston, straight multicolored in different areas. What I seriously think of is one small box being put on top of another small box, and each one painted solidly. So I was curious about your thoughts as to this type of housing that's now been around probably close to 10 years, and fitting this type of housing into the older style within North Brookline in particular, where you've got houses so much closer together.
Well,
and thank you.
Yeah, well, what you describe is a real problem. I mean, it's a scourge. If it's a problem in Brookline, it's a scourge in Cambridge, where people take down single family houses and they figure out how to create garages with 15-degree slopes to get parking underneath, and then build condominiums above. And they take advantage of zoning to build maximum footprints. You know, the thing is that everything what's amazing about the Hughes Tubbins house, that house was designed as a spec house. And all the projects, that house and the projects you describe have only one purpose. It's not to make the neighborhood look good. It's not about survivability or context. It's to sell once. And you know, those houses are so poorly built, they're basically made of glue and particles. They're very inexpensive. And you know, a lot of those houses, I mean, if you think it's bad in Brookline and Cambridge, look what, you know, go up any highway around here and you see these new neighborhoods that will be the new slums 20 years from now. You know, these buildings are not sustainable. They're not designed to last more than 20 years without major renovations and problems. So the answer, I mean, the thing is, the reason why I didn't talk about style is style is determined by good design. You know, a good designer, you know, figures out how to make a good building, and the style comes naturally from that. But these buildings are not architecture. They're simply building, you know, and yes, there's an architect that designed it, stamped the drawings, but they're not design architects. Now, I used to be I worked at Payette, then Moshe Safdie and TAC, and then finally 9 years at Elkis Manfredi. But when I walked out the door of Elkis Manfredi in 1996, I turned to Howard Elkis and David Manfredi and said, you know, I'd rather design a coffee building than design a building in downtown Boston. I mean, and it's not only the developers, it's also the people that run the towns. I mean, the biggest impediment to good construction in Boston is the BRA and the mayor's office. You know, and you know, we're supposed to, we're, a very liberal state, yet we have the worst architecture, new architecture of any major American city. When was the last time you saw a good new building built in Boston? You know, they're far and few between. I mean, you have to go to Cambridge, and don't go to Harvard. You have to go to MIT to see a good building. So I hope that somewhat addressed it, but I'm as upset by that as you are.
And you did, and I thank you.
We have somebody put a question in the chat. They're particularly interested in your comments on what were the challenges of each of the houses that you showed, the different case studies, if there's anything more that you would like to add to that than what you've already mentioned.
Well, the challenge of the first house was not to mess with it. It was such a beautiful house. It's so strong architecturally, but you know, unfortunately the inside had really suffered. So we were able to, you know, if the inside was already gone, so we went and did what we thought was appropriate. Believe it or not, the challenge for the second project was dealing successfully, and I thought we did, with the Historic Commission and, you know, other agencies. I mean, they you know, they looked at us with a great deal of suspicion. I remember our first hearing, and it was like, "How dare you?" And it was like, "No, we want to help. We want to save this house. I mean, if we don't do this, it's going to go, go into the demolition delay timetable, and then off it goes." So, we try and do the right thing, and we're pretty pushy with our clients, and luckily now we're in a position to pick our clients rather than the other way around. Wasn't always the case. But, we look for people that, we want to do projects that embody great design. And so style comes second to that. Budget comes second to that. Size comes second to that. People say, wow, you design big houses. That must be great. And I said, well, no, designing a big house is kind of like designing an SUV. It could be a Lamborghini, it could be a Kia, but it's still an SUV. Small houses are like designing sports cars. And designing a 3,000 square foot house, which is very rare around here, is like designing a Ferrari. It's awesome, but we rarely get the opportunity to do that. Sorry, okay. I digressed a bit.
Kenneth Liss has a question.
Yes, hi. I want to follow up a little bit on Leslie's question with a similar question. I'm the head of the Brookline Historical Society, and people assume I only like old style houses, but I'm actually a big fan of modern architecture. And I live in a 1,300 square foot Royal Barry Wills house, so I guess that's a Volkswagen Beetle, yeah. And then the car model. But I see a lot of really bad boxy houses around, but I see some good ones too, in Brookline and elsewhere. And I wonder if you could comment a little bit on that style and what makes a house in that kind of boxy style good, because I think there are some good ones around.
Well, there are, but there are some very expensive new modern houses that have been built. And I won't say where, because that would give it away, where the architect thought that if they got rid of the moldings, basically took a shingle style house, made the windows a little bit bigger, and then put a flat roof on it, the house was modern. What a disaster. What makes a house modern, I mean, what makes a volumetrically dynamic, a house made of platonic solids like rectangles work is a really lively figure ground relationship between glass and solid, that you look at that and it's like looking at a really good painting, like the painting behind me, which by the way I did, so it must be good. But what I'm saying is the other thing it requires is scale. So a house has to be house size. Like things can't be too big, they can't be too small, they have to be just right, using the Goldilocks rule. But most buildings today are built by developers where architecture and design is not a priority. I left the commercial world 25 years ago because I was utterly frustrated by, our clients telling us, Marcus, it's a really great idea, but I'm not going to pay for it. Why are you showing me that? I can't afford it. And then look at my boss and say, you ought to put someone who understands our motivations better on this project. And it's just like, it's unfortunate that in our society, and I spent a lot of time living in Europe as a kid, that if I lived in Sweden, I would be designing libraries and high schools. And I'd be getting as much aesthetic satisfaction out of that as I would designing houses for rich people here, because that culture, people are willing to pay the taxes and spend the money to create buildings that they value for generations. In the United States, it's not the case. You have to be, Frank Gehry, or you have to be a Starchitect. Look at how mediocre the result of the latest addition to the Museum of Fine Arts was. The person that gave the most money to that project picked the architect. It was a minor project, and it's probably the worst project that Starchitect has ever done. I don't know if it was done by Richard Rogers or someone like that, but it was really disappointing. So we have to stand up for good design.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions? Okay, well, Mary, did you just raise your hand? Okay, just take yourself off of mute so we can hear you.
Okay.
There you are.
My question is, for those of us who are interested in this kind of dialogue that just took place now, how do we continue that as lay people, not in the profession that you are in?
Well, I think that this is something I tell my new clients. What the challenge that a lot of our clients have, and a lot of lay people have, is that they're used to what they see. And they don't know, you know, we have new clients that say, well, I guess my choices are I can do a modern house that looks like a box, or I can do a colonial, or I can do a Georgian, but I basically have 3 or 4 choices. And we say, no, you have a million choices.
Mhm.
And the first thing we do is expose them to a lot of visual knowledge that enables them to be more knowledgeable themselves in what they do. But the thing is what I encourage everyone to do is understand the difference between good and bad design. And a really good one thing we tell our young architects that come to work for us is that in order to become a designer, you have to have a point of view. In order to a point of view is developed by liking some things and not liking other things. But in order to do that, you have to find things to like or dislike. So what I mean by that is go on Pinterest or buy a book on architecture, but Pinterest is great. And just as you go through Pinterest, you see something you like, save it. You see something you really don't like, save that too. And that, by doing that, you develop a point of view, and that makes you that empowers you to have strong, meaningful opinions when you stand up in front of other people at a ZBA hearing or historic commission hearing where, your voice can be heard. And also, when we do projects that require public hearings, we reach out to the community before those hearings take place as much as we can. Find the venues where you can confront the people that are challenging the character, quality, and nature of your neighborhood.
Okay.
I mean, that's the way I'd approach it.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Great. Well, it's been a pleasure to be able to show off my work. I don't get many opportunities, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for your time. It really was very wonderful, and you gave us all a lot of insight and great examples of really spectacular work that you've done. We really very much appreciate it. I appreciate the time that everybody has taken on a Friday night to be with us and to continue supporting Brookline adult and community education in our programs. We hope to bring you more things like this. And if you have any, particular lectures or, topics that you'd like to see, feel free to email us and let us know. But thank you so much, Marcus. We greatly appreciate it. Have a great evening.
My pleasure.
All
Bye-bye,
right,
everybody.
take care. Bye-bye.